Hi, I'm Catherine Llewellyn, the host of the podcast. You can find out all about Truth and Transcendence on truthandtranscendence.com. And you can find out all about me on beingspace.world, where you will find my online coaching offering as well as my UK-based workshops. The Freedom of Spirit workshop for liberation and empowerment, the Pellower Radical Shift in Consciousness workshop for spiritual expansion, and transformational coaching for exploring the mind-body-spirit connection on the expansive path. You can also support the podcast by actually making a donation. I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to Truth and Transcendence. You can find all our other episodes on truthandtranscendence.com. I had a chat the other day with a friend who tragically recently lost a loved one who passed over. And who passed over before their time, many of us would agree. And my friend said to me that the doctors, a little while before the person died, said to them, actually, yeah, there's hope for her. She could still come through. Just try this. She could still come through. And she discovered later that the doctor did not believe this. The doctor was absolutely certain that the person was on their deathbed. And they were basically saying something that wasn't true. And my friend said, him saying that made it worse because it gave us false hope. And him saying it made it worse because we also knew within us that it wasn't the truth. So not only were we being given false hope, we were also being lied to. And I found myself saying to her, well, yeah, it's not just him. In our culture, lying is accepted. Lying is part of what we do. And she said, well, it shouldn't be like that. And I said, well, I tend to agree. Then I went away and reflected on it afterwards. And I thought, well, do we really have a lying endemic within our culture? And if so, is that a bad thing or is that a good thing? So I explored a little bit further, and it turns out that lying and deception are natural. In nature, we find it all the time. We'll see a butterfly that has a design on its wings to make it look like a much larger creature. We'll see all sorts of situations where animals, plants, birds as well, are actually designed in such a way as to deceive other creatures that are existing in order to avoid being eaten, in order to intimidate, for all sorts of reasons. Deception is actually completely natural and rife in the natural kingdom. And we are, whether we like it or not, part of nature. So it's natural within us as well. So why do we have this issue around lying and truth? It's basically because we've decided to. We collectively have decided that lying is wrong, that it's not moral, that we should be truthful, whilst at the same time having within us this innate capacity for deception and for lying. So how do we marry these things together? How do we actually balance this up? We've invented a thing called the white lie. So the white lie is something that we've decided it is a lie, but it's a good lie. It's a good lie because it's for someone else's benefit. And in general, what we mean by that is either we are protecting somebody, or we are trying to save somebody's feelings, or we are trying to not distract somebody from their path, or we're trying not to upset somebody. Now, something these all have in common is we are withholding from that other person information which could affect their choices. And we're withholding information which could affect their ability to fully experience reality and truth as it is. And what we're also doing is we're introducing, or we are maintaining and consolidating, a lack of truthfulness in the relationship with that person. So if you're listening to this and thinking, no, but a white lie is for their good, I would agree that when we call it a white lie, what we mean by that is that it is for their good. But we've decided it's for their good. We've decided we know what is better for them than they might know. We've decided that hiding this thing from them or deceiving them in relationship to this thing is actually better for them. Now, some of us who are actually perhaps a little bit more honest with ourselves would acknowledge that sometimes we lie or we deceive for our own good, patently and clearly for our own good, in order to cover up something we've done wrong or shouldn't have done, or we've made a mistake, or in order to bolster our image. When I was much younger, I was part of an organization, and part of what we had to do was someone had to go out on sales appointments. And I had a blue suit, a nice navy blue skirt suit, which was smart. I looked smart in it. Someone else had a nice briefcase, and someone else had a nice, good quality women's watch. So I was lent the briefcase, I was lent the watch, I wore the suit. I think someone lent me a pair of shoes to go with the suit. Someone else did my makeup for me because I wasn't very skilled in that regard. I went out. My entire image was a deception. It was a deception that I was much more successful than I actually was. I had more money than I actually did. And as a consequence, that my business, our business that I was representing, was much more professional and successful than it actually was. It was a deception. Now, we knew it was a deception. We knew we were doing it for the good of our organization, and we were at peace with that. But it was a deception. So, again, that's something we do commonly. We adjust the filters on our Zoom setup. We wear makeup. That's a form of deception as well. We do all sorts of things to actually give people a different impression from the fundamental truth. So I would say I'm not arguing with any of these. What I'm talking about here is the degree to which we are honest about these with ourselves and our relationship with lying and truth. There's actually a spiritual practice which is about not telling lies, not lying. And if we go through an entire day, how often do we actually bend the truth or massage the truth in some way? How often do we do it because we have decided that we, in our infinite wisdom, know better what's for somebody else, and therefore it's in their own good for us to lie to them and not tell them the truth? And I think this is particularly important because when we lie, when we deceive other people, we actually create a disruption within ourselves, a disruption in the soul. Now, the degree of this, it really depends on the degree of the deception. So, for example, wearing makeup and changing our filter on our Zoom camera situation is a very low-level deception, and a lot of people do it, and we know we're doing it. So it's not really deception because people will know we're doing it. So it's part of life. It's part of the just way that we do things now. But a deception such as, no, I didn't sleep with your best friend. A deception such as, I'm absolutely fine, when the truth is, actually, I am feeling desperate, frightened, and I just really need some love and some support. Now, those sorts of deceptions are actually undermining to our own inner integrity. So when we tell the truth, we might think we're telling the truth for the other person, and that being honest and truthful is a virtuous thing we ought to do for other people. I agree. But also, we're doing it for ourselves. We're doing it for the actual integrity of our spirit, of our soul, perhaps even. So when we go through life lying and deceiving, we are undermining ourselves. One example that illustrated this whole thing, I was at a pub called, I think it's called the Blackbird, And it's in a sort of suburb of Oxford called Blackbird Leys. Now, anyone who lives in Oxford or has lived in Oxford for quite some time knows that Blackbird Leys is or it was certainly at that time, a relatively low rent place. And it was full of Irish immigrants and descendants of Irish immigrants. And it was also full of immigrants from Africa and the West Indies and offspring of those people. Many of whom would come into the country without much funding and then needed to find somewhere to live that wasn't too expensive. And the Blackbird pub had two main rooms, and one room was full of Irish people and the other room was full of African extraction people. And I was in the African extraction people side with my then partner. And there was a chap standing in the open doorway out to the back parking space. He was on the phone. And I overheard him saying, "I've just gone past junction 4. I'll be back in about 45 minutes. And then he, shortly after that, finished the call. And I looked at him and he looked at me and I said, "Did you just lie to your girlfriend?" And he said, "Well, it's for her good. It's for her own good. She'd be much more upset if she knew that I was here drinking with friends. So she'll be much happier if she thinks I'm still on the motorway." And I turned to the guy I was with, who was actually from Ghana. And I said to him, "What is it, with you guys?" Because a lot of these people who I knew from African extraction lied as a matter of course. It was just part of their behavior. And I said, "Why is this? Why do you guys lie?" And he said, "Oh, it's because we've been trained to as children." I said, "What on earth do you mean? How would that be? How would that even be?" He said, "Oh, yes, in Ghana." And this is obviously in his family, in his experience. In Ghana, if as a boy, if you tell a lie and you get away with it, especially if it's a big lie, then your father will boast to his friends about it, that you lied so effectively. And you're just encouraged. That's what you do. You learn how to lie really effectively and to lie in bigger and bigger and bigger ways. And that's considered to be an expression of manhood. And I said, "That can't be good for your soul." It's sort of, well, I'd never thought of it that way, but that is the case. That's what we're trained to do. Now, that's just an example. And I hasten to add that was his experience in his family. So I'm not suggesting in any way that this is a kind of a racial emphasis thing. I would actually suggest that in pretty much every culture, every Western culture, I don't know about Eastern cultures, there are pockets of subcultures where people are actually encouraged to lie. We are encouraged to deceive. And going back to the medical profession situation, that doctor was probably encouraged in his training to try to give people hope. He was quite possibly encouraged to do that. Although, we do hear the opposing point of view, which says they are told, never give false hope, never give hope which might be false, because we may end up being sued, and also because that's cruel to people. So the invitation this week is to actually do a little bit of self-examination and say, was I brought up and encouraged to learn to lie? And what is my relationship with so-called white lies? And how much do I lie? And what would my life be if I actually stopped lying? But just stopped doing it altogether? How would that be? What's the worst that could happen? And if what we think will happen is that we'd lose all our relationships and lose our job and so forth, then let's just question the foundation of those situations in our lives. Are we living lives based on lies? If we are, I suggest that wants questioning and challenging. So thank you for listening and watching. Please tell your friends, give us a 5-star rating. Maybe write a review, because reviews are really good for the algorithm. Thank you so much. Have a truthful week, and I'll see you next time. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. It really helps if you give a thumbs up, a 5-star rating, a review, and share with your friends. If you're looking for transformational coaching or an intensive transformational weekend workshop experience, I can help with that. You can actually help the show by making a donation. Until next time, take care.